Hey, Walter here, and today we're trying something a little bit different. A group of us from the Illustrati Art Discord decided to get together and record a live draw and chat session. We're all full-time artists who love making comics, and we got together to talk about world building, the necessity, the pitfalls, the problems, the challenges, and we also took some questions from the live studio audience, otherwise known as Twitch chat. Now, we may do more of these if you guys enjoy them, so let us know in the comments what you thought. And if you have any topics you would like for us to discuss, also let us know in the comments. And then on top of that, I will be playing some time-lapse drawings from 3 of the artists so that your eyes don't get jealous of your ears and they can both, along with you, enjoy the first Illustrati Illcast. Peace.
I'm not really sure how we want to start, but I'll just be like, welcome to the Illustrati Illcast podcast. We got all the Illustrati here today, and why don't we start by introducing everybody, and we'll just go in order of the Discord call right now. So start with Daniel.
Cool. Hey everybody, my name is Daniel Hooker. I do a comic for a literacy organization, and I've got a graphic novel series I've been working on.
Cool. I guess I'm second. That's kind of weird for a host, but whatever. I'm Ethan S. Brewerton. I am the penciler and inker of Cog and Flame, and you can catch me mechadoodling on my stream 2 days a week. Awesome.
Hi, I am Naomi Frankies. I'm freelance illustrator and comic book artist. Just finished up working on Tales from Hero Kind with Dark Horse, and I'm working on a graphic novel I hope to announce soon. But I'm bad at streaming, so.
Sweet.
1 second, sorry, my wife's like making coffee here right now, so there's about to be like a loud screech in the background. Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead, do it now.
Let
her.
We'll skip over Hoyt. Tricky.
Hello, I'm Joe Ng. I'm an artist for Udon Entertainment. They do Street Fighter comics among other video game properties. I'm also launching my first ever Kickstarter. If you go to www.code-45thenumbers.com, go check that out.
And I am Walter Osley. I'm a comic book creator, artist. I've done Metal Shark Bro, Shiver Bureau, Hacksaw, and yeah, that's me.
Sweet. So
and I guess I'll do mine now. All right, cool. She's done. All right, I'm Hoyt Silva. I'm an independent comic artist, webcomic artist. I've done some stuff through Webtoon Canvas and published my own book through Scout called Last Stop.
Cool. So today we're here to talk about world building and how it pertains to us as comic artists, whether that's through writing or through working on somebody else's project, how much visual world building we do, and all that. Is there anybody that wants to start us off on that has like any thoughts, or maybe a question to pose to all of us to get us started?
Yeah, I have a question to just put out there, because I have a lot of feels about world building, because it's my favorite thing ever in the entire world. What is it in any like story or series, movie or whatever that you get into and you're trying to, delve into the world building of that specific thing that completely throws you off of, just throws you out of the world?
As far as building it ourselves or when we interact with media?
Oh, just like when you interact with it, because building it yourself and making comics, creating does not exist in a vacuum. So the things that you consume as an artist, as a person who enjoys, reading comics and things that you would probably look out for yourself when you're making your own, like building your own world. What are certain things that you try, rephrase the question, you try to avoid when you're world building that would throw you out? Like, for me, for example, I think of, like with Harry Potter, you think of, they're still using owls, yet, like, in modern day society, it would not fit. Or J.K. Rowling suddenly saying, wizards used to just, piss themselves and then magic it away instead of running like water and plumbing, like civilization has had for years, things like that.
So you're saying those things are what throw you out of, break your immersion with the world.
Immersion, that's yeah. What are certain things that you would avoid doing in world building specifically that would break immersion? Or if that's too broad a question.
So no, that's a legit question.
Yeah.
I think so for me, I might be like the odd man out here because like I actually don't do very much like world building before I do a story. To be honest, like I try to like keep it as minimal as possible. Only like if it's like necessary for like the story itself that I need to know like how something functions or like how something works in the world. Otherwise, I really just try not to even like tap on it. Just because like I innately like hate keeping track of a bunch of stuff. So the more that I have to like keep track of that needs to work, the more that I am liable to like fuck that up. So on like my own stuff, on my own stuff, I try to like do as minimum of that stuff as possible. Like, you know, essentially just try to figure out what the characters look like what the major shapes are. And you know, if there's any like architectural stuff, maybe I'll do some like studies beforehand before I start. But after that, like I just sort of go into it because I just want to like do only what's necessary for the story. I don't want to get like lost in anything that takes away from that. And to me, exactly what you're talking about are those things, like the things that like either set up some sort of like arbitrary rules that are like soon not to be followed like in a world, or like if like there's like some kind of, I don't know, recurring thing that like isn't consistent like it's supposed to be to deliver some kind of gag or whatever. I don't know. Those are the things that like throw me off. So I try to like basically do the minimum to not have to adhere to as much of that stuff as possible, if that makes sense. I don't know.
So before we get too much further, and we'll circle back to Naomi's question, but I think that we touched on something that's really important here that we should start off with are there any of us here that do like a lot of world building before we start creating?
Yeah, me.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
is Naomi the only one?
I did a lot of world building for my first book before I started in it, but once I started it, moving forward, I dropped so much of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I had a
each
similar
of my other
experience.
projects I did too.
Yeah, I have too in the past. That's why I like just don't really do it anymore because like I'm like, I'm gonna drop all that, and like I said, it ends up being more of a headache for me personally. I find it really cool when I see like other people's stuff. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. It's so well thought out and like all of that. But when it comes to my own thing, like the more I try to think something out, the more it like slows me down in actually getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of stuff I'm doing, a lot of the world has already been built. I guess like the Street Fighter, particular like Street Fighter canon stories. There's so much, you know, out there already in terms of character designs and story and the worlds that they come from. It makes it kind of easier and harder at the same time to really stick to it because you have to do a lot of research and make sure everything's accurate. But then you don't have to think about, you know, building anything really. Only until just now I'm starting to really kind of get into, you know, building worlds out of the Code 45 book that I'm working on. But even that's based off of a real location. So it's been really interesting. And I've been doing a lot more than I expected to with this stuff.
So for most of us who don't really do a lot of world building, like what are the things that you've run into? Like have you run into any roadblocks not planning stuff out? Like I know I've written myself into a corner a couple times to where like, oh crap, I didn't really think about that, or because of the way I created something before, it doesn't really work for this story point, and I kind of have to like write myself around those problems. But I don't know if it's worth it to spend the time, like, you know, like how, like Naomi, how long do you spend like planning stuff before you feel comfortable jumping in?
Well, the graphic novel that I'm working on right now, a lot of what I've been doing recently is just kind of thinking of the world building because I'm still waiting on script and finishing up other schedules. I try to think of the main tracks, essentially. What parts of the world building are going to be important to the plot and important to the character that I'm going to be showing a lot of or spending a lot of time drawing. because for me personally, I don't like in a story where the story sets up like some rule for what the character, and they maintain that role up until a point where they just seem to have forgotten, or something happens that like just makes that rule arbitrary and unimportant anymore. Like, I just try to find, the main peers, like the biggest rules of the world, establish those first, before I start writing the story. And then as you start fleshing out the story, as you start coming across little instances in the story that may need more explanation, like, then you can go back and kind of introduce or flesh out those big road markers in the world rules, world building.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally legit. I mean, for certain, like, if there's like a certain scene that I know of when I read a script to a story that I know, or like a location that I know we're going to be coming back to quite often, I will like build that out either like via SketchUp or like do like whole room sketches and drawings for the room to reuse as like backgrounds and stuff like that if I know that it's a location that I'm coming back to. And that might be something that like I build into and like go a little bit more nuts with. Sometimes I don't like realize that until I get to the place where I'm like, oh man, I'm here at this. Here's this scene taking place in this person's hideout or whatever. In 10 pages, I got to come back to this hideout and do whatever. I'll go ahead and like figure what that room looks like out, and then I'll like either build it or like or set up like do some larger scale backgrounds that I'll reuse on multiple stuff. And then, but if like I see that I'm not going to come back to it, like if it's not going to be important, then I'll just like kind of BS it out to a certain degree, just because like I know that it's not, like you were saying, like I know I won't have to hold to that being a certain way, or you know what I mean? Like I won't pigeonhole myself in that, which is why like I don't want to like set as many rules up and flesh the world out like super thoroughly right off the bat, because then I feel like I'm beholden to like actually flesh that out every time.
Yeah.
Have you ever run into a situation where it's like, when you first get into let's say building a scene or a room or whatever, and you kind of wing it because knowing in your mind that's not really important, but then later on it becomes important. You're like, oh man, I wish I could have, fleshed out just a little bit better or planned it out a little bit better.
Definitely. I've done both. I've done actually one where like I fleshed it out where I didn't flesh it out and I was like, oh man, I should have. And then the second time I fleshed it out, and at that point it's like a waste of time because like, it would have helped me the second time, because you spend that time like building the model or putting up the reference or whatever it is. And then like, it's supposed to save you time the next time you come around to it. If I'm doing it on the second time, it's not really saving me any time. Like I've definitely been caught in that trap. And then I've been in the opposite trap where like literally in the story that I'm working on right now with Trey, so like the cars in the world, like I decided that I would draw them as like Akira Toriyama like styled cars, where they like have that goofy like K car compact but like high top like thing or whatever. And so I drew a couple of cars in the background like that, and I was like, okay, whatever. Then like the main character's mom's car, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like build a SketchUp model for this car. So like I found like a Honda CRV, I like edited it down so that it like looked like an Akira Toriyama like car. It took me like hours to get this going, but then I was like, fuck it, like anytime I need this car now, I'll be able to pull it out. I didn't realize that like literally 2 pages later the car gets smashed and I don't use the car at all anymore. So I was like, oh, that was me not reading ahead.
It's funny talking about cars. Like, so there was this one instance where I had to draw a car and I put so much time into it, and it was just like the craziest car ever. And then, but it was such a pain to draw. But then not realizing a few issues later, I gotta draw that car again for like the entire 3 pages. It's just like, I do that. Like, why did I put so much time in this one thing? And over and over again.
So, have any of you figured out any kind of tricks to know maybe when to plan ahead or when not to plan ahead in those regards?
I found that like the biggest safeguard, the easiest safeguard is actually to do layouts for the project, as much of it as possible at first, like whether that's even if it's like for like you know, even if it's like if I have all 5 issues, like the script of all 5 issues, if I can just like go ahead and like lay that all out or whatever, you know, so that I know ahead of time, that will save me a fuck ton of time, you know, on all fronts, like on just like what I need to figure out, what I need to like actually like think about. When it's like a project where I'm like drawing right behind the writer, that becomes a lot more difficult, you know, because if they come up with something, you know, and it's like, you should have told me this before. Yeah, I could have set up for this. Now I need to figure this shit out. So
that was me all during Tales for Harrow County. Like,
yeah,
I was fortunate. A lot of the settings were based off of stuff that Tyler Crook had already designed in the main Harrow County series. But then there were certain characters and elements in the story that, because I only got them script by script. I got the scripts as they were done, and I was working on them, so I didn't know it was going to be up ahead. That I realized after reading this, like, oh, I should have put more thought into this design when I first did it.
Right.
But, you know, some of those things are unavoidable. It's just kind of the nature of the beast sometimes.
Yeah, it depends from project to project. Ideally, I get like I would like to have as much of the script up front as possible. And I would like to have the time to lay out as much of it as I can before I actually start on any of it in order to save overall time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not ideally set up like that all the time.
Yeah, I'm lucky I was gonna say that I'm lucky that with the graphic novel that I'm working on, we have at least the first 2 drafts, like of the first 2 chapters, I guess, or issues, depending on how the publisher wants to put it out, more or less done. And so we kind of agreed that I would get the whole book, like the whole thing, like laid out first, because if it's issue by issue and you're just doing a series that's being released in like single issues, it's not as, I feel like, important versus where you're making a graphic novel where it's going to be released and it's going to be read in one sitting.
The whole volume.
The whole thing. Then you want to be sure that it's consistent, and that's, I think, when like the world building.
And I think you touched on something important there too. I think you touched on something like really important there too, where it's like it's the scope of the project also defines like how much of that I need to do.
Oh yeah.
Because like if I'm doing something for the web, like with the webcomic stuff, any of that stuff can be like edited and replaced like at any time. So I'm not as precious about getting everything right the first time.
Yeah.
But like when it's like something for print that's only going to come out in print, and once it's printed I can't change it, then like I'm a little more precious about like trying to get that shit right and like trying to figure out what it is that I need and I don't need. Just because like I know I won't get another shot to fix it, you know.
Yeah.
Well, if I can pose a question for everyone, I think I think a lot of people who get into comics or animation or whatever get into it because they enjoy the storytelling and the planning aspect of it, the world building, excuse me. So I meet people all the time who come to my table at conventions and say like, oh, I really want to make a book, and they'll have pages and pages and pages of world building. How does someone like that go from where they are to where we are? How do you get someone to move from there? Move from world building into actually producing, because clearly they've got the energy to produce content because they're already producing a lot of content. It's just not the actual end product.
Oh, that's the scary part though, because to me, easy is, you know, world building. You can daydream about it and you can write up notes and you can collect inspiration and draw ideas, but once you start the actual series, once you start actually writing and drawing the pages and putting those out there, then that solidifies it. It stops becoming this like ethereal, this thing that's doesn't have any defined edges and still has room to grow and change in your mind, to something that you are defining, that you are putting edges to, you know. And
I think exactly what you're saying is that like before you ever start, nothing can be wrong, but once you start, then things can be off or wrong or unappealing or anything. Like you have infinite editability before you start, but once you start, you know, that narrows it off. And I think that what Naomi's talking about is actually literally what holds most people back, which is like the fear of like trying to do it, you know. It's like literally just being afraid of like whatever judgments or whatever you think people are going to think about or whatever about your work, you know. I think
terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying, but like really the only solution is like to do it, you know? Like the thing is in the doing. So like if you're not doing the thing, then you know you can world build all you want, but it's never actually going to exist. It's like the Hollywood thing where like you know, in Hollywood like 500 plus movies a year are like produced. Those aren't like the greatest movies of all time. They're not like timeless classics. You know, you'd be lucky if like one of those movies out of those 500 is like decent, you know, and then but yet they're out there, and they're not out there because they're the best. They're out there because like they're actually being made. So to like get your stuff out there, the only way to do it is like make it.
I was gonna say, like, do you think it's a better idea to tell those people, you know, just to, you know, you have enough world building, you should go ahead and start, or do you think they're trying to like bite off more than they can chew? Like, because for a lot of people, it's their first project, and they're like building these like intricate worlds when maybe they should, you know, try to do like a smaller project. Like, are they trying to start off too large?
I think because I've experienced it, you know, growing up as a, I think sure we all have, but I used to in middle school make these like really ridiculously big worlds with my OCs and stuff, and then I would draw out these like comic pages in my sketchbooks or on like the old printer paper that had like the perforated edges, you know. I would draw those out, and then like I had no fear then, and then I grew up and went to school, and then people taught me to have fear, and I said, oh crap, you know. But I think of now the idiom that like you're never gonna think you're good enough to start, like you're not, no matter how good you actually are, or like what level you reach, and so you have to find somewhere small, something that's digestible in your world building, and then start from there. I don't think you have to abandon like the grandiose like world building and all the time that you spent thinking about it and planning, but you have to find somewhere that's easy to consume and easy to start on before you grow into the rest of it.
It's funny. Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, well, I never connected the two ideas, but a buddy of mine that went to school for gaming would always talk about feature creep, where you're working on a game project and you keep more details and we'll add this mechanic and things like that, and a lot of games that do that never actually get completed because essentially they're spending too much time on as sort of like world building for the game.
Right, that makes sense. Something that I was going to mention is like it's funny because most of my experience world building hasn't come from illustration because most of the time I'm working on somebody else's thing, but my outlet for that has always been Dungeons and Dragons and like running campaigns. And something that occurred to me that I feel like can be used, something that occurs to a lot of people that can be used in comics or any world building that you're trying to do is like nobody knows how much of it you figured out, and even if you make a mistake while you're going through it, you can always like rationalize your way out of it. So it's really hard to like make a true mistake, and sometimes part of the fun is like how Walter was saying earlier, how like he wrote himself into a corner and then he had to write his way out of it. Maybe not in the moment, maybe you might not have felt that way, Walter, but like I think like we got into comics like kind of chasing a challenge a lot of us did. Like one of the hardest things to do is to make comics, and along with the world building, right? So like it's all mutable, and you can make up your own rules when you're building your own world. So even if you make a quote unquote mistake, you can always, as long as you have the motivation, you can always, and you leave yourself enough room, you can always like talk your way out of it, basically, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and there's because I recently, you know, not to be a nerd in a group of nerds here, but I recently saw the new Boku no Hero, the My Hero Academia movie.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And I hadn't finished the series, but a friend of mine told me, well, it's basically an AU. It's an alternate universe because it's the ending that the creator originally wanted, but didn't decide to go with or with the main story. So it's how he wanted it to end originally. And I'm thinking, well, if, you know, he can do that with an anime that's been established and stuff, you know, all these people have these like rules or restrictions in what you can create, and so if you decide to make a story that like you go one way in your world building, and then later on you're like, oh, I just thought of, you know, a different direction it could have gone in. There's no one saying you can't just say, hey, here's a little one shot of what could have been, you know, but you have time to explore everything. You don't have to do everything right now, right this instant. And I think that's something that a lot of creators feel like the pressure of when they first start, that they have to do everything now, you know.
Right, that it has to be perfect the first time, or that it has to be like right. Yeah. I think that's a pressure that I honestly didn't give up until I started doing webcomics.
Yeah.
Like I always thought about it,
but webcomics especially that like.
Yeah, I think it's just because literally, like, at any point in time, like, if I really don't like something, I can just, like, go over there and I can change that panel, and, like, it doesn't, you know what I mean? It nobody will know. Anybody who reads it from that point forward will read it now as it is, and anybody who read it before, like, read it as it was before.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back and start commenting on all your changes.
Yeah, well, see, so I don't do it as much, but like, so I don't do it that much, but like, I think just having that in the bag, like, frees me up to like be like, well, whatever, you know, like it's if later on I decide that this isn't it, I can change this, you know.
Those of you who did Webtoons, who like had the weekly thing, like, do you think that that's a factor of like the speed at which you have to produce the comics, so you kind of have to like throw that stuff to the wayside?
Yes, for me, for sure. I again, that's why I try to do like as loose as possible without like being too like nitpicky about the world or getting exact, or even like with the characters being like super ultra consistent. I think if I like lean more in iconography and sort of just give people the idea of what's going on and they get it, that's like enough for me. Because like I'm trying to produce and like get out like a bunch of stuff right now, you know, instead of like spending a lot of time perfecting one project, I want to get out like a bunch of different projects. So I have to make choices based on time, and that's like a key factor right there.
That's kind of the thing with any like comics, if that have like a recurring release, like any monthly comics or web comics, you have to get over that illustrating a mindset that it has to be perfect when you put it out there, and then just just put it out there. Just focus on, you know, in the writing and in the art, what's going to be the most noticeable, the most important aspects that you want to highlight, that you want to show the reader, and then focus on that. And then all the little extra details are things you can, you know, fuss
it's
over
like
later.
What's essential for the story, like what gets me past this moment, does that make sense right now, you know?
So the thing for me, like when I started doing my webtoon, because I always create under this assumption that a lot of things don't really matter as much as people like put into it, like with world building and stuff. I'm always kind of like, just go do it, you know, don't worry about it. If you mess something up, you mess something up. It's not going to be perfect anyways. And I've always created under that assumption, and that's why I've made as much stuff as I've made. But when I started doing the webtoon, and people were commenting on it, like that had the most eyes on it of anything I've done. So there was a lot of people commenting that I wasn't used to, and it's like all in real time. And the things that people pay attention to like just boggled my mind. I'm like, I didn't even think anyone would care about that tiny little thing. And so like when I started doing Hackstory, that's what made me want to spend a little bit more time with world building. Because I saw like how crazy people were about tiny little things.
That brings me to an interesting question about something that is only available now to us now that we're in the future, and we get that feedback so readily. Is like how much does that affect what you're doing in like the next issue? Like if somebody might have like a great idea, right? Like they might be like, "Oh, you did this because of this," and I see it, and then you're like, "I didn't mean to do that, but now that's why I did it." Yeah, and like in the future, that's what's gonna happen.
I've actually.
We'll never admit
it. All right, wink if that's what happened.
I actually so for Last Stop, when that was coming out, I actually didn't read like any of the comics, and that was like posted weekly. I didn't read any of the comments. My wife read them. Occasionally she'd read me some, Trey read them all, but like I did not, because I mean Trey was done writing it by the time we were posting it on there, so he, like, nothing for him was going to change. I didn't want any of that to influence me and what I was doing, so I actually avoided it so that I wouldn't have that happen. Like,
Gotcha.
exactly.
That's weird because like I haven't done webcomics, but I'm a glutton for punishment. But also I have a bit of an ego, so I like to go and see who likes me. I'll read I mean, you have to have a bit of an ego in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, you got it, definitely.
Yeah.
More on that in
like,
our mental
I am
health
doing well. Huh?
episode.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't go. I get tagged in them. Reviews of comics that I've done. Like I've been getting a lot of reviews for Harrow County because they're promoting it. And so I'll go and read. And I remember one from like the first issue of Tales from Harrow County that went out when I was still trying to figure out, doing a whole comic in watercolor and ink on paper. Which I've done watercolor illustrations, but I've never done a comic in watercolor. It's a whole other beast. And this reviewer was just like, "Oh, she lacks the nuance and the nuance and the subtlety that Tyler Crook had in the original." And this is again probably for the mental health topic later. I was fully like, "Oh, you said what now? Fuck you, fuck you. I'll show you." And so like I go into, but it did help me think about how I approach the stories illustratively in the next issues, where I'm like, okay, what am I doing that's working and what am I doing that's not working for me, and I learned a lot, I feel, with that medium. So it helped me.
I get worried that I'll just like do it for that one person, And I'll be like, oh, fuck this guy. And then I'll like change everything for that one guy. And then like literally that's the one guy thinking that, And then like here I've like now like just screwed myself, And that's just me. That's like my own like paranoia about that kind of stuff. So I just like don't. Yeah,
I forgot that guy's name already. I don't even remember exactly.
Look at that.
I just remember being like, I'll show you. Say something. Say something else.
Right.
It's funny you guys mentioned that, because like when I was doing the Code 45 book, and it takes place in actual train stations in Montreal, and if you've never been to a train station in Montreal or a subway station, they're all very different. They're all commissioned by, they've all been designed by different architects, and every single station is a different style. And so the first station that I showcased in the first book is the Peel Station, and I mean, it's for the most part it's Peel Station. But there's a one guy on Kickstarter that just pointed out all the details that makes it not Peel Station. And like, okay, I mean, the criticism is fair. It's not exactly like Peel Station. But he was, I don't know, he's got some kind of, like, he's totally obsessed with these train stations, I guess. But it's got me thinking, like, from now on, maybe I should kind of keep that in mind going forward to make sure these details are accurate as possible. And it takes me a little bit more time to do that. But if it helps the immersion of the book and the story, to help someone be immersed into this world a little bit more, then why not, right? Why not?
Yeah. But it's a trade-off too. I think it also depends on how much that impacts the amount of time that you have to put into
100%.
the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and how important it is to the story too, whether those like details are even relevant. Like, I mean,
no, for sure.
Upsetting one like train guy that you didn't get a train right or a plane or a car right or whatever, versus like if that has any impact for most of the majority of the readers is like something I guess you have to like personally weigh.
Like I'm not counting tiles or anything, but like
I think,
what do you mean you're not counting tiles?
I counted 10.
Here's a question then. Here's a question. Do you guys believe that however far you render your details dictates like how much you actually have to like prep for that stuff? Because like if you, like you're saying, like if you want to get those details right, then you'll have to like make sure that like those when you go to those locations, they're like all correct. But like we were saying earlier, if you're only going to go to that location one time and it's not so relevant to the story, how important is it to like actually, get those details 100% correct?
Yeah, it depends on a lot, I think, per person, because every creator values, the level of accuracy differently. If you're telling a story that's based in a real world place, like a lot of people like doing a Spider-Man story, or you're doing something that's like in New York, and New York is iconic, and for a lot of people, even if you haven't, like, if you don't live there, there are certain things that are like, this is New York. there's a certain level of research that I feel like will help your story, the immersiveness, and a certain level of attention to detail. But like, if it's not going to be that end of the world if someone's like, oh, you didn't draw my favorite pizza joint on the corner, like no one's gonna look that closely if the story is mostly on the characters. But then you have like, I saw Tokyo Godfather in theaters recently, and they had a little after thing where they went around Tokyo and they took pictures of like alleys and like streets and like the homeless shanties that were right next to the glittering lights and stuff. But even then they went back and they added stuff to it. They added more trash bags piled up, they added more graffiti, they added things that would help sell the story in that scene. And so it's not exact because they altered and they added things and they enhanced certain aspects of those photographs, those places, those real world places that they took pictures of, but they enhanced parts that would push the story more. And I think if you're gonna have an important scene or interaction, the characters in a scene, even if it's not a recurring scene, there's that I think that helps being able to sell the world, to immerse the reader in.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, there's always going to be critics that are. Someone's going to complain.
It's just given.
Yeah, but I do think that critics and the fact that we're all kind of our own biggest critic are one of the hang-ups people have when they get into world building, because in the end, you're going to find plot holes and other people are going to find plot holes. And
yeah, so I just wanted to take a minute to remind all of our viewers that at the end we'll be answering questions about world building that you might have. So feel free to use the link provided to ask us those questions.
I have a question to pose for the creators. Do you ever think about world building in your story as a consumer? Like, even though you're creating the story, you're writing, you're illustrating it, do you ever think about it from the standpoint of a reader? Because I absolutely go into fan fiction and I love seeing people, draw or write, fanfic that spins off of a point of a story. Maybe in the actual story they only focused a little bit on like the scene or these characters or this aspect of your world building, but then I enjoy seeing fans that like build off of that,
I mean, whenever I do world building or anything like that, I always do it selfishly. Right? It's like what I think would be cool.
Yeah.
Anybody who has a different opinion?
A lot of times I kind of do the same thing where like I'm obsessed over something, but then I have to keep reminding myself like no one's going to notice this. Like absolutely zero people are going to care that I did this. So you have to kind of keep bringing yourself back into that particular reality, and that kind of, and more than anything, it's just saving time, right? Like if we had all the time in the world, we would load this stuff up with as much little details as possible that we think would be important to the story. But a lot of times for me, especially the way I work like relatively meticulously, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, I hate how I drew this shoelace. It's just like no one's gonna care about this ever. But
I constantly think about like time put in versus like time absorbed, which is just like if I put 8 hours into something that somebody's gonna take like 2 seconds to look at, I'm like automatically like, wow, I probably wasted that time. Like
I wish there was a way.
No one's gonna spend that much time with it like I am.
Oh yeah, I wish there was a way to like zoom out. Like if you're working digitally and you're zoomed in 100%, I wish there was a way to, with writing or working traditionally, to like zoom out entirely of what you're doing and see from like the far away perspective what it looks like. Because I feel like most readers are gonna be like that. They're gonna be at that far away perspective.
I agree.
Yeah.
I have my zoom like maxed out. You can actually like in Clip Studio set like a maximum zoom so that you can't go past a certain whenever you're like zooming in. So I set that up to like avoid that basically, so I can't go in and look at details and stuff like that.
I caught myself doing that when I was working on paper, and then I get the comp copies of the comics in, and then I see it at the comic the actual book size. I'm like, I put so much time and detail into shit that you can't even see in print.
Yeah.
Like, why did I do this?
Yeah.
It all makes
Right.
sense
That's
now.
my biggest fear too.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's my
I think
biggest
it's all
fear.
our biggest fear. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the end product you can't even see it. So
Yeah.
like the book I'm working on now is gonna be printed like manga digest size. So like dude, like I am not trying to put like details into this thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That when
Nice.
printed, like it's just gonna be dust on the page.
But it's gonna look nice.
Only on my computer screen, dude. Only on.
Yes, we
reminds me of
have to print big and sell prints of it.
Ugh.
That reminds me of
I
the
don't
time
like
in
it.
college. I took like a summer course. It was like a 1 month thing for comic book art, and the instructor, I forgot his name, but apparently he had his own indie comic out at the time. This is back in like 2002, 2003, and so one of the exercises was to draw a page from the script that he had given everybody, and I was like doing some hatching on like this girl's shirt or whatever, and he came up to me and he was telling me like, you know what, you should make your hatch marks like further apart because you're not going to see that in print. And later I found out that was the worst advice ever because it's just like what, like I don't know, it felt really weird someone telling me that I can't shade this way.
Yeah.
Because it won't be available, you know, like you won't see it in print. And like today, you know, with technology and everything, we can see like have these beautiful prints where you can see all this detail and you can like make them, you know, as big or as small as you want. It's just like you can't tell me like I'm hatching too finely. Like I don't.
Yeah, it'll turn out like a nice tone. But then you have when you're actually working with like digital screen tones and stuff, if you have to work at a certain scale or like fidelity with the screen tones, because there are certain ones that when you print them, they do this weird like linear effect in print, and I forget the name of it. There's like a
it's like M something spiral.
My brain's going mesotint, but that's a printmaking technique.
Yeah, no,
that's not correct. But yeah, I just think of, okay, how far is too fine, too finicky that you're screwing the end like the end product, or you know, how much is it? You know what? Let me enjoy this. Let me enjoy this moment of zen where I can like cross hatch this whole section.
What I'm saying. Exactly.
There's an manga artist, Daisuke Igarashi. I think that's his first name. Igarashi is his last name. He did Children of the Sea. And to watch him like draw his scenes out in ballpoint pen, he'll like draw in ballpoint pen the tone of the sky all by hand, and it's just like light ballpoint hatching.
That guy gave me anxiety watching him. I watched him like working, and it just like gave me massive anxiety because I was like, dude, that is just a lot of wasted time. But again, like that's just my perspective of like how I want to do things and like.
Insane.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, and that's the thing is, I think you're talking about Mom Ben, right? The series Mom Ben, where they sort of where Urasawa like interviews him and stuff, and you know, even Urasawa is just basically like, oh, that's like, I think there's a point where he talks about it, and he's just like, hey, like, you know, I want to do a bunch of stories, so I'm not going to do all this detail like you do. You know, he's like, it's cool what you do, but you know, I can't do that if I want to like produce a bunch, because that guy was basically saying, he's like, yeah, I only have like, you know, 2 or 3 stories left in me in my lifetime, like at that pace, you know, and that to me is like a huge like eye opener, because I'm like, yo, I have like dozens of stories I want to tell. I can't like slow down to only tell like a few, you know, like so like I think you have to take like what's important to you and like how that works for you and what you're comfortable with, you know, with like what you want to achieve. I think like it's like I still see like what he does is successful because it successfully like gets across the point he wants and does what he wants to do with it. But like would not be successful for me, because if I spent a bunch of time like that, even if I got praise for how like good it looked, it would still bother me that it took me so long to do it, you know? So like I just like effectiveness to me is like the most key thing, and as long as it's effective to like the person, then you know, more power to him. But like watching that guy work gives me like massive anxiety. So
I want to think about the animators who had to do the movie.
Oh my god, no way,
coming
dude.
Out.
No,
I saw the trailer, and like they're doing all the little fine detailing, like the little finicky eyelashes.
I know, but that's like 100, you know, that's like 100 or so people like working on that, you know, so it's not near as bad as
Thank God.
just one person, you know, because it took him years to make that book. So
Yeah, so how are we doing on time, Walter? I don't know how long you wanted this to go for.
I think we're coming up on an hour now, and I know some people had to dip at 5, so we might want to start wrapping stuff up.
Question.
All right, so let's go over to our questions that we have on the Discord. Is there somebody that wants to read them off for us?
Sure.
PJ.
Just like I hit my push to talk button, and then I realized I was in the chat, and it just kind of like a line of like slashes came up.
Perfect.
All right. So first question, Peter the villain. How am I still a member? I don't know. I can't answer you. Acrylic. It might not exactly be on topic because I just got here, but I've been itching to do a couple short stories, about 3 to 5 episodes, and throw them on Webtoon so I can experiment with various different ideas that don't relate to each other at all and just practice storytelling in general. Awesome. Love it. I hesitate on doing that because as far as I know, Webtoon is all about lengthy episodic series that tell a big story in the long run. If I just do short stories, won't I just not get eyes on my stories because they'd be finished and get buried super quickly? Like, I still want to do them, and I probably will do short stories, especially with the contest that's coming up. So I don't know too much about Webtoons. I've been approached a couple times, and I've read certain things. They do seem to favor ongoing things. It makes sense that ongoing stories would get bumped more regularly because updates are happening in as the chapters come out. My advice, if you want to do like short stories, don't worry about Webtoons. If you're just doing like little minis just to experiment, put them up on Tumblr or make a word space or somewhere to host specifically those, or you can make like a PDF and put them together to download on like a Gumroad or for free if you don't want to charge. Because really at that point it sounds like it's just kind of you experimenting and wanting to practice and tell those stories and stretch your legs in different genres. Maybe that's what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, you should definitely do that if you don't want to do something long and episodic. But also, I think on Webtoon, as long as you're posting regularly, maybe it's not as crazy if you're jumping from genre, jumping short stories or whatever, because if you just have like an anthology sort of strip on there that you're just doing whatever you're doing and you're posting that stuff, as long as like you plan on, like, I think if you want to see success with it and like see it grow, you just have to keep to like a schedule with however long you do it. Because like that's just how webcomics, that's the strength of webcomics, is like literally just posting and becoming a part of people's schedules consistently, and then like building the readership from there. So I think it's like doable, but I don't know if you want to go that. Like I see the benefit of like having it there because then obviously there's like millions of people that can like read and comment on it if they do find it. But at the same time, like, yeah, if you don't want to like, I don't know, have like a quote unquote failed webtoon, if that even like is a thing that could possibly exist. Yeah, I don't know.
Is there any downside? Is there any downside to posting in a webtoon?
I don't think so.
You said something about like doing an anthology webtoon series, and suddenly I'm very interested in that idea. Like every like posted update is its own little mini story.
Yeah.
And like,
So
yeah, I've actually wanted to do something like that for a while. You just have to get people together to do that. That's the difficult part, is actually like corralling people.
Maybe not an anthology with other people. It doesn't necessarily have to be with like other people. Like if you just want to do
your own
thing. Sure. Like Mushishi as a series, every episode is like its own contained story within the same world of Mushishi. So that would be a really cool like webtoons thing. I would, as a reader, would enjoy. Just putting that out there.
Tricky, you were gonna say something?
Yeah. So to those who aren't familiar with Webtoons and how it works, can someone just kind of give a real quick description of it?
Yeah, so it's like it's a platform where anyone can go on there and post comics. They're set up to be like the infinite scroll vertical format. You retain like all the rights for everything that you do. They don't actually own anything of what you do on there, so you can go off and like do other things, post on other sites. You don't have to just post on Webtoons. Webtoons isn't the only option. There's like Tapas and like a few others. And yeah, you can just like post it around. It's just like it's a platform that evolved from basically like Korea's Google, which is like Line. And they had their own like webcomics thing at first, and then they expanded it like worldwide. It just has a massive reader base. Like, it's just really easy access. Has become very popular with people, and there's just millions of readers on there. So that's like, I think its biggest strength is that it just has a large, wide variety of people on there like reading things.
And from what I understand, Webtoons, pretty much anyone can make a Webtoons account, right? And just kind of post whatever they want.
Yep. Yeah.
I think is there like another tier where you actually paid as a Webtoons artist, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah. There's like a featured. Actually, Walter was featured, and he got paid.
I got money.
Yeah, I actually, when I did my Webtoons thing, I did it for free. I did it on at that point it was called Webtoon Discover. Now it's called Webtoon this. And that's the next thing. I'm gonna put my next webcomic on there too, and go through the same cycle.
And I think it makes sense too to put up like an anthology style comic. Like, I wouldn't say like create, like a 5 episode comic and then create like a whole new comic like with its own website and stuff. Like, it should be an anthology. Like, one of my favorite comics is like His Face All Red, and that was from a creator that just did like a bunch of like mini stories. And even if the stories like change, like the genre changes or whatever within that anthology, I think because like Acrylic's the creator, so Acrylic's voice and the art is going to stay consistent. So that's what's going to make the anthology cohesive. So people will come back for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Urasawa has I think it's like Dreamscape or Dream something like that. He has a graphic novel of an anthology of different stories that he's put together. So I think like it's an idea that's been done well, and it should work well on Webtoons especially. I feel like.
Yeah. I think the only thing is literally, if you just want to grow an audience on there, is just posting consistently. So if you're gonna do the anthology thing and post a bunch of different short stories, just make sure you queue up a good bit first before you like start launching, and then stay on schedule posting like every week whenever you decide to post it. And I think you'll see growth, even if you switch like from one type of story to another, or from one thing to another, just as long as like people know that that's what they're in for.
All right, cool. So I think we spent a while on that question, and I know that people have places to go. So what's the next one?
So I've heard the concept of the gardener. This is from Least Famous Steve. Of the gardener versus the architect when it comes to storytelling. The former works gradually and grows and cultivates a story, while the latter sets up everything from the beginning, knows exactly where the story ends and begins, everything that's right place. I struggle to define my writing style concretely between the two. Who of you has heard of this concept, and if so, how have you built your respective stories, especially concerning writer's block, so to speak? Also, some of the stuff y'all said about critics and bending over backwards for them reminded me of Penny Arcade's Strip Search. Oh, God. I highly suggest watching it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. If someone else wants to answer first, or since I did it last time.
Is there anyone?
I nominate Ethan.
Daniel sounded like he wanted to say something.
Yeah, and then I had a brain fart. But
okay.
I think I was just about to say that from my personal experience, kind of like I said earlier, I started going the route of like really in-depth planning, and part of that was because I didn't even know what I wanted to do with the project. In the end, it was all just world building, and it was just fun. But I think you don't even really have to choose one or the other. I think you can go back and forth.
Totally agree.
That if you find that you've already put a lot of world building into the project you're working on, and you are finding yourself stuck on something world building wise, in my mind, I would say just go ahead and start building the product then. It's not like you're building a house where you can get halfway through and then realize, oh crap, now the whole thing is going to collapse on itself. I mean, that kind of can happen, but better to have the product in the end.
Yeah, you can always like write around it, right? Like, if it's going to collapse, you can find a reason for it to either work or collapse, but as part of the story.
And then just know that, the next project you do too, you don't have to do that again.
Right.
I think like messing one thing up on one project doesn't mean you have to like always mess that up forever. I think that's the other thing to understand too, is there's like always a next project. There's like always a next thing you'll do or want to do.
Yeah.
You have to stay.
Well, I think something that's helped me with writer's block, and I feel like is a good in between the gardener and the architect, is a method I kind of picked up from a friend, the snowflake method that I just linked, where this is what I use Excel spreadsheets, believe it or not. I will set like very basic plot points that I want in the beginning, middle, and end, and then I will branch in between those two as I'm writing out the script or as I'm writing out the progression of the story. And in doing so, it kind of becomes a gradual like progression of, oh, if I do A, then X can happen over here,
Right.
And I feel like it's a good in
Smart.
between the gardener and the architect because it
Yeah.
lets you flow organically, but it gives you a bit of a guideline and structure to follow when you do start scripting,
Yeah, I probably am more the architect than the gardener, or I guess maybe a combo of both. I try to find on my own stories when I'm doing them, I try to find the ending first. If I can find that ending, then I work backwards from there. I find like that answers a lot of my questions if I have my controlling idea in the ending. I just know where I'm going.
Some people I think have done the figure out the beginning, figure out the end, the middle comes next.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's another good point.
Yeah, because if I know where I want to end, then it automatically tells me like where I need to begin. I don't know. So.
Anybody else have any closing thoughts on that?
Nope.
Cool.
Okay, next question. Quacktastic Dono Ducky. When you guys have a graphic novel, I love these names. When you has a graphic novel or comic I can't read. When you guys have a graphic novel or comic in process, what is your overall schedule or plans to get in a good flow and not burn out quickly? I literally have just put a giant calendar on my wall to help me keep track of what I'm working on, but also I set business hours for myself. That has helped me a lot in keeping my brain healthy and not burning out, but also giving myself space to relax, breathe, and think about my process. I do all the pages, like technically I'll do all my pages and layouts, and then once I get that done, I try to do everything in stages. Like that will help organize me a lot as well. So I'll do layouts, I'll go back, do all my pencils in one go back, do all my inks in one go, and if I'm coloring, go back and do all my colors in one go. But I have also run into the problem where I'm getting too close to the deadline. If I'm working with the colorist, I will just get pages done as quickly as I can because my colorist can work immediately behind me.
Right.
So it really depends on, I guess, your situation, your deadlines.
Yeah, I'm the worst at this when it comes to creative block. I jump between pages, so I have like 3 pages, 4 pages going on at the same time. So if I'm starting to draw something specifically, I'm sure everyone has felt this pain, crowd scenes.
Oh God.
Yeah, and especially with the stuff that I've been doing with Street Fighter, where there's basically always a crowd watching. It's a street fight.
Oh God.
So when I'm just tired of drawing miscellaneous people, I just have to go to another page, draw something more interesting, kind of get my creative juices flowing again. And then once I finish that, I'm happy with that. You get that jolt of satisfaction that you've done something kind of cool, and you can go back and tackle the crowd scene again. So for me, I kind of find other ways of kind of refreshing myself by drawing something completely different to go back to drawing the stuff that's incredibly mundane.
Yeah.
I've done that with layouts. If I know a really cool scene is coming up and I'm feeling stuck drawing a crowd scene, or I have to draw a horse and I'm like, oh, horses, I'll just skip ahead to this really cool scene that I'm super excited about and then draw that and then get that buzz. Sorry, sidetrack a little bit. When you do crowd scenes, who else draws their friends and
all the
into the
time.
crowd scene?
Yeah, of course.
This is your cameo.
Yeah.
Okay, back to it, sorry.
Yeah, no, so I do not jump around also. If I jump around, like, I find that I just won't get shit done because I'll do all the cool shit and then I'll just leave all the crappy shit and then I'll just be like, I don't want to do this. And then it'll take me forever to get around to it.
I'm in the same
So
boat.
for me, like, yeah, I just gotta start at A and end at Z and just like draw everything one to one to one. If it's something I'm not interested in, I'll try to like just basically breeze through it as fast as possible.
Yeah.
You know, like just because if I don't do it that way, I like prefer like so I have more fun doing it the other way, but then I also just don't get it done and it takes me longer if I do it if I just like jump around. So I've just like learned to just fucking do it. It's not the funnest way to do it, but it is like it helps me get it done, you know.
It does take some discipline, like self-discipline. Sometimes you just got to sit down and do it. It's a job at the end of the day. But sometimes you can have a little fun as a treat, you know?
No, true. No, I'm not knocking the other way. I just personally, for me, I just can't.
Yeah.
I know myself well enough that I will fuck that up. Like that is me just asking to mess that up. So.
Anybody else have any thoughts on this question before we move on?
I do layouts and pencils in order, and then I'll go back and just kind of like jump around with the inking. And I assume I'm the only person who does what I'm about to say. Maybe I'm not. Hopefully I'm not. But I have a habit of if I draw a character in a panel and I really like the way that character comes out, then sometimes I will just continue to breeze through the rest of the book, only drawing that character in every page and every panel that they pop up. Since it's like fresh in my head, and then I'll go back and start filling in with someone else, filling around them.
That's weird, and you should feel weird.
Never done that before. Never heard of it.
I've never heard of that either, but I like the idea, and I might steal that.
Yeah, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, I feel like that's a nice like halfway point between what we were all just talking about. I mean, again. Because I'm also worried about my consistency, and I'm not very consistent. I feel like it's harder to notice my inconsistency if I'm inconsistent slightly over time throughout a bunch of stuff. If I just focus and do one thing directly and then get good at that, but then have to jump back and do something that I'm not so good at, and it be next to something that I did really well, I feel like it points out that that's not very good. So I again like do stuff in order to like have my inconsistency work to my advantage.
I feel I'm the other way around, where it's like I want, if I do the splash pages first, I'm super excited about it, and that's the quality work that I get. No one's gonna notice all the bad stuff happening in the background, right? Notice the crappy car that I drew or whatever.
That's the energy that you want to put in there. Your big establishing shots, your big splash pages. You want those to look great, and everything else can be whatever.
So I had this conversation with Francesco Francavilla once, and he was telling me that when he runs late on something, what he'll do is he'll do the first 5 pages of something, and then the last 5 pages of it first, where he'll have more time, and then like all the stuff in the middle, he'll just like basically like fill in, because his idea is that like, you know, when you start off, you're like building the world, and that starts to make the impression on the person, so you have to pay attention there. And then when you land, you have to like make sure that you leave them with like a good feeling. All the stuff in the middle is just like transitional, and I thought that was like actually really smart as well, you know.
That takes some
like
really accurate that takes some really accurate layouts.
Yeah, it's again it takes the goal. You have to like be, you know, oriented on like what the actual goal is and how you're gonna make it there, you know.
I'm gonna try that, because I use my layouts, especially when I work digitally, to do all the hard stuff like perspective and gridding out like where everything is. So my layouts are relatively super neat, and I sometimes use those as my pencils if I'm working digitally. So I may try that. That sounds like my mind is blown.
I've done it before. It works in some of the stuff that I've done, especially when you're in a tight schedule. You know, it makes me feel a little bit better about like, hey, well, I know that I took the time, like I'm coming up to the last pages and they're already done, you know, so let me just, I don't know.
That's cool.
It's definitely worked out.
Okay. Anyone else, or should we do the next question? I think it's the last question.
I think we're all set.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
This might be a good question for Ethan, actually, as our local mech lord. When drawing mechanical things, meaning something along the lines of mechs or just hyper-futuristic vehicles, from Wizard Emperor, sorry. How do you pad out the space between body panels and in general go about filling them in? while still keeping it interesting visually. I have an interest in motorcycles and can't bring myself to make components up for the sake of filling a space out or just make it look cool. Mechs are so heckin' cool, and I want to be able to model them confidently. They are heckin' cool. You are correct.
This is definitely a question.
Is there anyone who wants to throw anything in here before I go in?
No, please, sir. Mech Lord, please.
Please, Mech Lord.
You've been trading your entire world, your entire life for this moment.
Thank you for our life.
It's funny because like I feel like every time that I do mechanical stuff, it's basically just filling in the gaps between two different things, and it's usually just filling in the random gaps in between random gap filling, basically. And I wish that I had better advice than to be like, just think about it as basic shapes. But really, it's like connecting boxes with tubes and cylinders, and that's like the way that I do everything. Obviously, I like skip some steps when I'm doing like my Mechadoodle stuff, where I will modify those boxes slightly to make them more visually interesting without doing the work of like sketching it out first. But yeah, I mean it's just boxes and cylinders and tubes, and you just keep making them until you run out of space, basically.
Can I add something for you, Ethan?
Yeah.
Ethan went on a tirade last year, I think, where he was teaching us all how to do mechadoodles, which is pretty fantastic. I did one, and it was a lot of fun. And beyond that, I don't do any tech stuff. I think it's the worst. But
yeah, I leave most of that up to SketchUp, to be honest.
But I think what I learned in doing it is that it's just like drawing anything else and building up a visual library. But instead of building up a visual library of actual objects, you're trying to build up a visual library of shapes and the way they interact with each other. And the more you do that, the easier I imagine it is to then go back and fill those gaps in.
Yeah.
Again, from someone, I don't really do mech, but I appreciate mech when I see it. Like, I'm really into like really cool Gundam designs, and when I do like a Gundam model, I appreciate like the physical act of putting it together, because it something about a three-dimensional model and like piecing things together helps my brain understand how like these shapes work. But I think sometimes if you're looking at mech like a Gundam or something, every inch isn't always a detail. Sometimes like they allow a flat space or a surface to be like clear. Maybe just add like the interest of texture of like, wear and tear on it, or some decals or something. But especially if you're looking from far away and you have the silhouette of the whatever you're designing is clear, but also you have areas of focus that aren't super detailed out, help with the depth of things.
You mean an
so I think like I like the idea of like connecting things with like the tubes and boxes and stuff, like what Ethan was saying, but then you can connect those tubes and boxes to areas that let your eye breathe a little.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And even though you guys might know me as the mech person, Tricky, didn't you work on like Transformers for a long time?
Yeah, I did Transformers for a while.
Tricky's even more mech.
Well, Naomi actually hit the nail on the head right there. For me, when everyone talks about like doing cool mechs, and Ethan does this, and I don't even know if he knows he does it, but it is to leave some room for the mech to breathe, like for the eye to not be overflooded with details and wires and gears and stuff. So when I would approach doing Transformers, I would actually draw them in the way kind of the cartoon draws them, but having like the joints and the stuff that's kind of peeking underneath all the panels, to load that up with little gears and pipes and stuff, and it gives it a little bit of like tactile feel to it, right? So definitely, yeah, I completely agree. Just not overloading with details, because you're just going to wash it all out with details, and it's just going to look flat. So having those spaces Yeah, exactly. So just don't make it look like just garbage, right? Like that turns into a robot.
Well,
Oh.
Garbitron.
Recent.
Yeah.
One thing I liked about the Bumblebee movie that came out, the mech designs versus the Michael Bay Transformers movies, is that they actually let that happen with the design. They gave it clear spaces of like flat panel, and there's emote like in their faces.
Yeah.
And recognize them at a distance too. Like I recognize more Transformers in that movie than I did in any of the other Transformer movies because they were so clear in their designs.
Right.
Which was fun.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think the trick too is like whenever I'm trying to draw a mech, which I try not to do, like I have in my head, I'm designing it and I'm trying to make it like this really incredible thing because when I pictured other drawings I've seen of mechs, like my brain has filled in all of this detail. But when I go look for reference because I can't draw it, I find those images and they're not as detailed as my brain remembers. So I think like, yeah, we're just like a lot of times when you're having problems drawing those mechs and stuff, for people who have problems with it, like you're trying to overcomplicate it when really it doesn't have to be all that complex.
That's a weird thing the brain does. Like you know what an apple is. You know what that looks like. But when you have to draw it without reference, maybe sometimes you'll like try and add little details that aren't that you think should be on an apple.
Gears, pivots.
You know, like give it,
like thumbs and fingers.
Some jeans and boots with the fur. You know, like. And then you go back and you're like, oh, the stem isn't that pronounced on an apple, or like the little bottom apple butt, whatever. The bottom of the apple isn't that like pronounced?
The apple butt.
Apple butt.
But a lot of it is like a lot of people tackle mech in a way where they use details to hide fundamentals, and I think if we're talking about the base drawing, perspective, right? Perspective for make sure everything kind of fits together. As long as the perspective is fine, as long as like proportionately everything kind of works together, it'll look good. I think it just boils down to the fundamentals of just drawing, forms and make it look 3D.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Transformers is like the one I actually got offered years ago to do a Transformers cover, and I passed on it because I didn't want to draw. I was like, the way I draw, I'm not going to give a shit about all this like little detail and make sure that everything's right. And I knew that the fandom of that was like particular about that kind of stuff, so I was like, let me not. I was like, let me not be the guy that burns on this cross, Just like,
That's absolutely how I felt. I got to do like a little like 2-page mini end of the comic like joke script or whatever for a Robotech comic that came out, and I was so concerned because I was like, fuck, I'm gonna have to draw a spaceship, I'm gonna have to draw recognizable Robotech merch, and then I was so glad when the actual script came in that most of what I had to draw was like make it look like a chalkboard drawing. I was like, I can do that. Thank God.
Nice. So it took me a while. It took me a while to get away from the whole Transformers kind of pigeonhole that I was put into. Even to this day, like when I go to a convention, I get at least one kind of Soundwave or Optimus Prime commission, and I'm just kind of like, oh, really? Okay, I guess so.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's like I'll do it. It's just I don't particularly find mechs difficult. I find them tedious. Like, that's the issue, right? Because you got to make sure everything looks right. Because if the perspective's off, then it's going to look wonky.
Whenever somebody's like, they see my mech digital stuff and they're like, I want to see a comic with this. I was like, no. Definitely not.
Like you can do it.
Of course.
10 years from now, you'll have it.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
The heart is willing, but the body is soft and squishy. No.
Yeah. Cool. So that's all of our questions. Is there anything that anybody wants to say before we do our outro stuff?
Back Tricky's Kickstarter.
Tricky's Kickstarter. Oh yeah.
So I figure we should end this by reintroducing ourselves and telling people where they can find our work. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So we'll go. Let's start at the bottom this time. So we'll start with Walter.
At the bottom. Wah, wah. So I'm Walter. I make comics. I've done Hacksaw, which you can read on Webtoons, and Metal Shark Bro. I'm also making YouTube videos for anybody that wants to learn how to make comics. And you can find all of my stuff everywhere, just at Walter Osley.
I'm Joe. I'm also known as Tricky Digits. Doing some Street Fighter stuff. Should be coming out later this year. I'm also in the middle of kickstarting my first creative book, Code-45. You can find all the details at www.code-45.com, 45 the number. And you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Tricky Digits, all one word.
I'm Hoyt, and I'm a comic creator. I've done Last Stop on Webtoon, and you can go read that totally for free. We've got a new Webtoon that drops this Friday the 13th called Mongrel, about a girl who accidentally adopts a demon dog. And you can find all of my stuff on hoytsilva.com, or you can find me on Twitter at hoytsilva or Instagram at thehoyt.
Hi, I'm Naomi Frank. You can find my most recent work with Tales from Harrow County. I'm currently featuring some work in an upcoming art book on Kickstarter, Hiraeth, A Longing for Home. You can find the link for that on my Twitter, at Naomi Frank, and I'm at Naomi Frank on all social media. So.
Sweet. I'm Ethan S. Burton. You can find all my stuff at Ethan S. Burton. If you can't find it for some reason, you can go to my website, ethansburton.com, and it has links to everything. I do Twitch, Instagram. I don't really do Twitter. Make YouTube videos every once in a while.
I'm Daniel Hooker. I do an educational series for the National Center on Improving Literacy called AR Chronicles. I also have my own graphic novel series called Line of Ruin. The first volume is for free on Webtoons, and you can find my stuff everywhere at Daniel Hooker Art.
Sweet. So this has been the Illustrati Illcast podcast. Thanks for watching.
Part 1, first episode.
Part 1.
First
episode. We did it.
Good job, everybody.
Yay!
Everyone for your questions.
Yeah, thank you for the
Thank you,
questions.
guys.
Yes, thank you.
And actually, for those of you watching, if you have any ideas on stuff that you'd like us to talk about, hit us up on the Discord or through any of our DMs or whatever. Though, maybe not in the DMs because some people don't check those.
Yeah, I would also add for people who don't know about the Discord, we do have the Illustrati Discord where the 6 of us and a bunch of other creators hang out and share what we're working on and talk shop.
Yeah. Not to mention activities.
Yeah.
Comic Chaos.
Plenty of
Love
activities.
activities.
We should probably plug Comic Chaos, eh?
Hey.
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 Since it's comic related.
Yeah.
So if you want to get into comics, or if you're already in comics and you just want to hang out with other people while making comics, we do Comic Chaos, which is where a bunch of us get together. We make a comic from characters all the way through colors in like 3 to 5 hours. We use draw piles, so we're all working on the same canvas at the same exact time. And it's a great way to like dip your toes in if you're thinking about making a comic, or if maybe you've tried making your own comic and you stumbled a little bit and you want to know how we get through that. That's a great place to go to get that information, and you'll end up being credited in a Webtoon comic that we put up, and we do that every first Tuesday of every month. So the next one will be April something.
So when is the next Illcast going to happen?
Good question.
Good question.
Very good question.
Good question.
Maybe we should discuss that off the air.
Secret.
Do we want to try and make a recurring thing, like on the same day, or just...
No, this is the only one.
Yeah, we're done.
This is it. This is it. We've done enough.
There are no more questions we talked about.
Yeah, I've said everything that I could possibly say about everything. So.
Yeah. But we'll figure it out. Everyone will announce maybe a week or so before the actual day of.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Knowing us, maybe not.
A couple hours before.
Yeah.
Surprise! Round 2 starts now.
Yeah.
All right. We have to say bye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Not really.
No,
We're hanging
stay
out.
here forever.
Okay.